All right, we're going to call the meeting back in order. And some unfinished business is the item 9, proposed zoning amendments. Sections 1743 and 44, short-term rentals.
Yes, thank you. As you are all aware, during the first months of this year, the city council worked with the city manager and municipal attorney Cliff Bloom to develop proposed amendments to the aforementioned sections of the ordinance related to short-term rentals. And you all briefly considered this text at the July meeting, but there were questions on 3 items noted in the original council motion, sending the amendments to you for additional clarification. And you do have written communication in the packet from the city attorney related to these items. As a reminder, some substantive changes to the zoning text include the business unit saturation controls and annual allocation process that was described in section 1743 were eliminated. And this language has been replaced with a hard cap on the number of short-term business rentals permitted in the city. This change will eliminate the annual snapshot report and any potential lottery. There is still a list of developments that are excluded from the cap that's similar to the list of developments in the ordinance now that were exempted or excluded from the saturation ratio. These are primarily PUDs like Harbor Club, Trailside, and some attached condominiums. There are also some changes related to personal rental unit regulations, the fee language. We talked a little bit about this last time in section 1744 has been modified so that fees are set by council resolution, and property owners will need to qualify for a personal residence or primary residence exemption in order to obtain a personal rental registration. So, Mr. Chairman, we have the city attorney with us tonight. We need to discuss this text and then discuss next steps. So,
Okay, is there anything you'd like to add?
Briefly, Mr. Chairman, Kelly did a good job of summarizing it. The city council made its motion on June 3rd to pass this on to you for consideration with the 3 issues that were open that I addressed in the email of July 30th. This is unusual. I mean, obviously, normally an ordinance would start with this body and would make its way to the city council. I think there was a feeling that they wanted to give the planning commission some guidance and suggestions and so on because this was such a major issue. And the city council and staff actually spent a lot of time on this draft. So I think it took a while to get a consensus on that. So that's why we're here today, and I'm glad to answer any questions or concerns.
Okay. Who wants to start off?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I just have like 4 overarching questions. First one is, it's always good when you amend or draft an ordinance as a body to have objectives of what you're trying to accomplish by doing so. So were there objectives that the city council set that we can use as a kind of a review guide as to the changes that were made? I mean, what were the actual objectives?
I don't know that there was ever a list prepared, and keep in mind, at this point in time, it's not an ordinance format per se.
Right.
And eventually it's possible that we'll actually put some findings and so on at the beginning, but I think the council had many objectives, or individuals spoke, but as far as a unified objective, Kelly, I'm not aware of any written. Obviously, the big issue, and we came into this new, we became city attorneys shortly after the first of the year. We've worked with a lot of other municipalities on short-term rentals. This is probably right now the hottest issue for the majority of our municipal clients. I think perhaps the overarching concept that I came away was that the lottery probably was not working. It was very complicated. You were up to 20% and so on, and there seemed to be pretty much unanimity on that. But Council member, I'm not aware of any written objectives.
Okay. Second question is, and I ask these because a lot of this was in closed session, I believe, a lot of discussions. There's nothing in the revised ordinance about density, something within 250 feet or, 2 per block, whatever you'd like. I know that was a discussion point, I think, back in 2018 even, and it was found it probably too hard to accomplish. Was that discussed and thrown out, or was it not even discussed?
Yeah, again, I can't really get into what happened, but in general, I do not recall in the open sessions or with staff a discussion of density or setbacks. And if I could, I should have mentioned this to the chairman earlier. Our recommendation was to do the zoning first because it's triage. The city council staff and our office have been working on the separate regulatory ordinance, which is probably 3 times as long as this. We'll go into a lot of detail. Your issue is interesting. I'd have to think about it and discuss it with staff, whether you would put, whatever you want to call it, setbacks between short-term rentals and the zoning versus the regulatory. I can think of arguments both ways.
Third question, can I assume the answer you just gave about density is the same for overlay? Probably not discussed.
What do you mean by overlay?
Just having overlays within certain neighborhoods where it's intended for there to be a much more dense population of short-term rentals, whereas in other areas, it would protect the character of the neighborhood by not having as many.
I don't recall a discussion about overlays per se. I mean, in general, we had discussions with staffs and so on about problems in certain neighborhoods versus other neighborhoods, but I don't think the idea of an overlay was ever explored.
And then the final question is around what I consider somewhat complexity of the existing ordinance, where we have, exempt personal, non-exempt personal, we have exempt business and have non-exempt business. Was there any thought of just having one set of standards that apply to all?
I don't believe so. I think we didn't want to reinvent the wheel because people had relied on the format and so on. We tried to make it clear. I think maybe we clarified some of the wording, but no.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe I
Mary?
could add, yep. My understanding with regard to the lottery is not that it wasn't working, it had actually never been done. And I think one of the biggest concerns of residents, at least that I'm hearing, and I know other council members are hearing, is enforcement and compliance. I mean, even now, people with personal short-term rentals are supposed to submit their rental periods, and that doesn't happen, and there's no enforcement. Regarding density, I know that I know some city council members have been concerned. I know some areas have been much more impacted, and I know certain areas are very concerned of similar impact and are trying to avoid that gentrification. So that has been a concern, and I think has led to the priority to redo the zoning ordinance, possibly due to so much being discussed that some items didn't have time for discussion. I know I had provided Kate a comment about overlay because some areas are more amenable to short-term rental, but it appears not to have been remembered in discussions. Again, we discussed a lot, but I know I had suggested an overlay in an email to her, like in April. One thing that I think is missing from this that we had in the previous is that Sherman Hills was to be stricken, and that hasn't been stricken. And I'm concerned that there may be some ambiguity with regard to attached condos because I'm quite certain that there are some dwelling units that are identified as attached condos, but they are cottages and are not attached. So that would need to be clarified. For this one issue that I have been raising, and I still struggle with it, is the lawfully existing as of December 31st, 2023. The ordinance was amended in 2018, I believe July 2018, and that changed how things were looked at and what would be considered grandparented. And that language has been stricken, so I'm concerned of issues arising from that. But that was one issue that I would, like I said, am struggling with is, as of January 1st, 2019, things changed. Occupancy was supposed to be 12, and whether certain things would or not, was existing or not, that it's not as noticeable in the zoning ordinance, but once you combine the zoning ordinance with amendments in the regulatory ordinance, I think that's where some confusion is ripe to occur, some ambiguity, and that was why I was I requested that I wanted to see both the regulatory and the zoning to see how they meshed, and with changes in definitions, I am concerned that the lawfully existing will allow things that are currently not lawfully conforming to become lawfully conforming. I appreciate that there is a list and concern about setbacks and things like that, but the list of 5 items is really, I don't think, the concern of the residents. I believe the concern of the residents is compliant with the short-term rental ordinance as it is written now with regard to on-site parking, what's a bedroom, what the occupancy should be, and that's all part of the review process. So that shouldn't be as onerous as the email would make one think. And so that, I still want to have further discussion on that, because I don't want something that is not lawfully conforming right now to inadvertently become lawfully conforming because of changes of how definitions are in the current regulatory to the next regulatory. For demolition, I'm a bit concerned with the reference to lawfully non-conforming status, because for the short-term rental permit to continue, it needed to be lawfully conforming, at least with the short-term rental. And I don't want that to get lost. I know there was reference to things started in 2023, but in January 24, we have a new city council. I think the composition is different. So to this extent that things are relied on from decisions in 2023, those really need to be readdressed. For the cap, I did raise a concern without having a number for the cap, that there's the inference that we're trying to remove all short-term rentals. And I don't think that was ever expected. Everybody understands that short-term rentals are part of our community. The issue that brought this all about is having reasonableness balance between the number of short-term rentals, which really is a commercial operation in our residential areas. Without a number, the rhetoric is that people are trying to eliminate short-term rentals, and that is not the situation. We are trying to have a reasonable balance of these commercial uses in our residential districts. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about transferability. I know in the regulatory, we talked about transfer of the permit. But in light of the fact that, in January 1, 2019, the way the ordinance was written, there was supposed to be a difference. And I would like to understand transferability with that interpretation. That is it.
Can I respond briefly?
Yes.
With regard to whatever you want to call it, density, separateness, not a lot of municipal ordinances have, but some actually do have setback. They say a new short-term rental can't be located within 1,000 feet or 2,000 feet or whatever beyond that. The cap will have a number in it. Staff just has not figured out that number yet. And there's no use on doing that if, for whatever reason, ultimately you take that language out. So that's a placekeeper. The intent is definitely to have a number in there by the time you have your final recommendation and city council makes its decision.
But is the number going to be the number we currently have? Or, see, my understanding is the cap is what we're working toward.
No, the cap would be the ones that are legally out there, the business ones as of December 31, 2023.
That are legally existing. And that is my concern, is that without a lower number, just being, that it will be ratcheted down without a number to which the target number for the ratcheting down, there is the misunderstanding that short-term rentals are trying to be eliminated because there's no number, so it's being ratcheted down to 0.
Well, it's
And-
only ratcheted down if someone doesn't renew or they're found not to be lawfully in existence. So the odds, let me just throw out 700, just take that number. The odds of that going down to 0 is 0. I mean, you might have over several years, because people decide they don't want to do short-term rentals or they're found to be illegal, it might go down 10 or 12 or 15 or 20. So obviously, and that was not discussed. If you or the council want to put a floor on it, you can do that. But that wasn't the concern. The concern was not to let it keep going up and that it would ratchet down as people gave it up or so on. But you can do a floor also.
So I think there was a misunderstanding because I know that some city council members have gone on record with a floor number. And maybe the misunderstanding is some believe that the number legally existing in 2023, December 31st, 2023, is the floor. Although I understand the ratchet. Again, that is something that I think we need to clarify, because I do know that there's rhetoric out there that because there is no number, there is no floor number, all short-term rentals are trying to be eliminated, and that was never
That has
intended.
never been raised with us, but that's certainly, obviously, something the planning commission and township board can put in the ordinance if they want.
And I do want clarification on the legally existing, because
We've addressed that several times, and hopefully staff either has made that available or will make it available to the planning commission. We respectfully disagree. It's like the dock, that you gotta jump off into the deep water and not know what's there. This is true for your whole zoning ordinance. The lawful nonconforming issues are not just in the short-term rentals. There's no way of inventorying, whether 700 or 650 or whatever. You really have to do it on a case-by-case basis. And the regulatory scheme, as we've discussed, is out there. If the zoning administrator gets a complaint, investigates it, and finds there's a violation or there's not, the property owners or the neighbors can appeal that to the ZBA, and the ZBA will make a final decision. But Michigan law is just crystal clear. Once someone has a lawful nonconforming use, you cannot take it away unless they violate. They violate the zoning ordinance, the registration, or the regulatory ordinance.
I'll continue to think of it. Like I said, I know our current ordinance references January 1st, 2019, and
But we've got a whole series of new ones that have come out since then. And again, we're always happy if you or anyone else has some language that you think is better, we'd be glad to look at it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Clark?
Oh, just two of them. I think my understanding was that, and I was very involved in 2016 onward, that we had come up with how to calculate a cap. We had suddenly come to the first time of hitting whatever that 20% was, and the lottery was something that was coming, and we didn't get to the lottery. Now, I do believe a cap is something, the goal that council has. And it's probably, from listening to the meetings, some number less than the current number, and that's a cap. That doesn't change or take away anyone's ability to do their short-term run if they currently have a business STR. Now, over times, when we give one up, or family doesn't want to do it anymore, or they miss and forget for a year, that number is going to come down. And I think what that then does is we don't issue any new until suddenly we come under the gap, making it easier for staff to know whatever that number is. And I just pick a number out of the air of 250. So it'd need to come down 26 before we issued any new ones. And then at that point, hopefully there's some ability in the other of how to, who gets that one if somebody wants that one. Now, I think one of the benefits that we looked at early on and did not adopt was the personal STR based on a PRE. Now, that was kicked around as an opportunity. And the reason we went with a personal STR was like community input was that many individuals had the wealth and opportunity and investment to have a business STR. What about any other resident within the community who didn't quite have that ability? And we said, look, if you live here, we can let you do it at a much smaller scale. And the intent was a personal reason for doing that, not a business reason for doing that. I think if we had adopted the PRE, we wouldn't see that large number of potential personal short-term renters that are doing things beyond what a personal STR would be, because we would be looking at a much smaller number of individuals who this is their primary home. So I think that is a good way to look, and I wish, had we had that before, we may not even be here now, because I think it was the increase of that number. So I think that is a good put into this ordinance. I'm a little concerned with the 180-day calendar individual being able to enforce that. I think the flat-out PRE,
I think that was.
But that was stricken.
that was the stricken, that is the part that was stricken?
Yeah, go to page
Okay, that looks like
94.
it was underlined as opposed to strike
No,
through.
that was stricken.
Thank you,
Page 95.
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, the final version, I believe, is the May 28. And the earlier one that has May 14th. And by the way, I made the same error earlier today. I kept thinking, and then I realized there was a May 28th.
It's, yeah, okay. That being stricken, I think is right, and just let the PRE stand on its own. I really do think that is that's really what was needed originally. So then we knew that individuals who lived in the community, and that was what we wanted to provide, an opportunity to have the ability to do that. Those are my comments.
Okay. Anyone else? No? One question I had is regarding the fees. Although I see council can set it by resolution, I'd like to see some parameters around that. And we've talked before, there was per unit or by square footage And I think basically you can only charge as much as it costs to administer. So, I don't know, it seems too gray yet for that, for me.
Tim?
Yes.
Can I respectfully play devil's
Sure.
advocate? I don't think we've done that with other uses, have we? Put a limit on what the fees can be set? So
That I'm aware of.
you certainly can do it. I mean, the ordinance can say that, but I think the idea is it's so hard to anticipate what's going to happen in the future and so on, to give the council discretion. I mean, it would have to be approved by council. Staff could not set it, but.
Well,
If-
I'm thinking about, okay, so you're ratcheting back each unit. So now the fee gets larger and larger for each remaining one. Some of these homes are way bigger than other ones, and I think it's disproportionate to make the smaller ones pay the same amount as the larger ones. Because each year, if it keeps dropping down, and if there is a floor, the costs are basically the same, right? For administration, the staff's still the same. There may not be as many inspections.
Right.
Mary?
So I have heard that from other constituents, that an efficiency apartment in a condo complex doesn't take nearly as much time as a 7-bedroom, 6-bathroom home for all of the inspection requirements, and that there should be some sliding scale based on the amount of time that the inspection takes.
So that's why I'm saying in here, we'd have to identify the
Wouldn't-
method.
Wouldn't that be in regulatory? Couldn't that be in regulatory?
Probably not if it refers to the zoning fees, but again, the question is, when it's in the ordinance, it's pretty much in stone. You make a very good argument that the council ought to adopt a resolution that has a sliding scale or whatever. It's just, the question is, do you want to handcuff and put it in the ordinance to make it definite? So that's it. And then one of the other problems is, hopefully inflation's not going to go up a lot in the near future, but if you lock it in, although you implied this earlier, Mr. Chairman, if you still say it's got to roughly reflect the costs of the administration, that limits it a little bit.
Right, because the devil's advocate on this is if you had a completely, let's say, anti-short-term rental city council, they could raise the fees so much as to make it insane.
Agreed.
And so how do you control that too? That was one thought. What was the other bullet point? I don't remember.
I have another one, I'm sorry, I'm coming back.
That's okay.
Okay, and that is,
Waiting for Janice, but
I know.
Janice isn't saying.
I will do after Janice.
Okay.
I agree with the density. I know we discussed it early on.
Janice, pull your mic
that
down.
was that was a question, but the thing that stopped it from going further was how do you manage that, or how do you determine that? And I don't know with our new technology if that is something that can be determined more easily than previously. When we talked about density, I think staff thought it might be burdensome to try to regulate that piece. The other one is the floor. I think that that's important to where are we headed down toward. And the lawfully existed phrase, and this may not help at all, but rentals that were registered and recognized as STRs as of December 31st. I don't know if that would help with that. No, I thought it was deeper than that.
No.
Yeah. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Janice. Now Clark.
Okay, when we were talking about approved underdeveloped or partially developed plan units, PUDs, one of them still listed is Maplegate. And I'm not sure if Maplegate is underdeveloped or partially developed. I thought that was fully developed with all of the homes.
I
And
I
would-
believe it's fully developed too, from my personal experience.
So I remember the intent was we had PUDs that were highly underdeveloped, and this helped fill out many. Certainly, Woodland Harbor and Trailside Phase One, and I think also Maplegate. But now, seeing that Maplegate is completely filled out, I don't think that should be excluded because it's full. And it says right in there, dwelling units within the city-approved underdeveloped or partially developed plan unit developments and name them. That one is fully developed, so I think it should be removed, in my opinion.
Mary pointed this out, there's so many moving parts in this. And
And
Kelly,
we live
maybe-
here, so
maybe-
it's easier sometimes to go. I run by there 3 times a week.
Maybe you can help me. Is the problem that I don't have the word undeveloped, developed, or partially developed? Or wasn't the intent that regardless of whether one of these properties or all of them is developed, they were going to be exempt? It wasn't the fact that a development had not been developed yet or was undeveloped that would make them exempt. It was that the council seemed to indicate that all 4 of them are just going to be exempt.
I was on council when we put that together, and that was the reason we put it together that way, is we had developments that were highly underdeveloped. In fact, I think Everett Park had 1 or 2 houses on it, and now probably has 25, 30. So
I think just
that
20.
was the reason to put that on there, because I felt like that would spur development of those PUDs. And it certainly spurred the development of Maplegate, because now they're completely full. So that's why we put those in there.
So are you asserting that the developed ones should be subject to the caps and registration and so on?
Because they've developed. They are now part of the community fabric of what I would consider a developed neighborhood.
And I would support a recommendation to that effect to the city council.
And see, when we started this, I had said that every dwelling unit should be part of the count.
Yeah,
And
we did.
And you guys well, I don't remember what you specifically, but decided that no, certain developments were gonna be exempt,
And that's why that was put in there.
so.
I wanted the density, and that didn't get in, but as a body, we created something, and then it moved on to city council, and
If
Breathe
that's
life into it.
ultimately the way you go, and if city council agrees, we're probably going to have to define what developed is. Does that mean 75% of the units are built, or otherwise someone's going to say, well, unless 100%?
then I guess we would, need to come up with that, but I'm good with that, because that was, Chairman brings up the exact reasoning. And also, he did in fact say we should put them all in, so,
And every year, there's an annual report of the number of dwelling units in South Haven that I used as reference material for percentage.
So that report will no longer be created under this version?
Not the
just-
city's report, this was a federal report
Oh, okay.
that said how many dwelling units. They put it
The
out every
census,
year.
the census report,
And
yeah.
you could say, okay, out of that, using that as the baseline, here's the percentage, this is how many permits you can have. It was nice and simple, but it got way complicated.
And I would encourage the planning commission to consider, also having the condominium units excluded. I believe one reason that was left in there is there's the thought that the HOA would control which would be condos or not. It's my thinking that the condominiums, the apartments, those tend to have the smaller footprint, tend to have the lower price, unless they're right on the lake, of course. And those would be the stepping stones for a workforce family coming in, buying the smaller attached condo units. And having them excluded and being able to be income producing inherently increases their price.
I have a question regarding Maplegate. Was that considered a PUD?
Yes.
It was, okay.
Have we solved anything yet?
Not yet.
Because
We answered any of your
recommendation, Kelly wants us to review and discuss the proposed short-term rental ordinance amendment language and any changes that you guys want to make. Are there any changes that you want to make?
Oh, I'd like to remove just Maplegate from the PUDs that are partially or underdeveloped.
And I want more specifics on fees.
I've been keeping a list.
And I don't like the hard cap, because you're always building new units. I think the cap can
It's
actually.
not a hard cap anyway, as long as it can be decreased on an annual basis, it's not a hard cap.
It's a bottom cap.
No, well, there isn't one of those in it either.
Hard cap up or down.
Mr. Chairman, obviously,
Yes.
it's preliminary review, and you're going to go through the public hearing, and things could change, but the list I've been taking of issues, density or separateness, should you look at an overlay district, ambiguities regarding the attached condominiums, lawfully in existence, should there be a floor, should the fees be set or at least tied to only reasonable fees for the costs? Is it Maplewood?
Maplegate.
Maplegate.
And whether or not to make the condos, I wasn't real clear on that, exempt or non-exempt?
Not exactly.
Exempt,
Non-exempt.
Non-exempt.
not excluded,
And
using the new language.
Yeah,
Whatever kind of consensus you have on this, even if it's a loose consensus, we can revise this before your public hearing and get you a red line version also.
Well, I don't know about everybody else, but I think the square footage or bedrooms or something should be
Yeah.
used as part of the fee calculation, not just same price across the board for all units.
I think occupancy might be something to consider. If occupancy is 6 or less, the fee is A, and if it's between 7 and 10, it's this, and if it's 10 to 12, it's that, whatever, but a sliding scale
Just
based
like
on
we do with the
occupancy.
marinas, you bring your
Yeah,
boat in,
exactly.
we've got, it's $80 per linear foot per night.
And the beauty of doing bedrooms or occupancy is that number is already known and recorded, as opposed to square footage where you'd have to send somebody out and do the
All the
calculation.
tax things have your
Oh, that's
square
true.
footage,
That's
it's already
true.
there.
And I keep going back to this cap. Either way you say a cap, I think that's what's sending people off the deep end of, we're trying to get rid of short-term rentals. Instead of a cap, like, we're just trying to manage the number is the language we have to use. And I'm not sure that cap is really helping anybody. I mean, we're just trying to keep it under control. That's all.
And that's where I say if you use that federal dwelling units per year, you say whatever that number is times 20%, 15%, 25%.
That's where we started.
That's where we
And we
started.
got all
Some of that.
complicated.
Yep.
And here we go again, getting complicated. The truth is, every time we have talked about this, everybody says, what is that in hard numbers? So everybody's got in mind a hard number. Why are we playing around with all this other stuff? Let's just name a number and go with it.
Well, because the number changes as new construction happens.
No, it doesn't. We just took that out.
We did.
Oh,
We did. There's no, and so I would say, I think that some of these concerns about neighborhood level density maybe don't come into play on this text because we're not granting new certificates.
If you talk to any member of the board, they will give you a number that they have in mind.
Yes.
That may not be the same one. It probably won't be the same one. But everybody that I've ever dealt with on this has got a firm number in mind. And we play around here, and we play with the zoning ordinance and tweak little things to try to cover up the fact that we have a firm number in mind and try to control it with other things. And we're complicating a lot of things going that way. Now, I've said it, and it ain't gonna happen, so I've said it.
Never say never.
And I think the PRE, had we had that earlier, would have taken hundreds off from the rolls, because every second homeowner probably wouldn't have qualified for a PRE.
It's been history in this town for many, many years. The people come here, buy a home, and rent it out to pay their taxes until they're ready to retire, and then come here and have a house to live in. And
True.
that isn't gonna happen anymore. I've got it right across the street from me now, and it's working for him as long as he has a short-term rental. But it isn't the way it worked for his dad.
Yep. All right. Is there much else we can do with this right now?
Would you like us to notice a public hearing for the next meeting, or do you need to see it one more time before we notice a public hearing?
Yep, I would. All right, let's just do a straw poll vote on this. Who wants to see the amended ordinance before we do a public hearing announcement?
Okay,
Everybody?
we'll bring
There
it
you go.
back we'll bring it
One
back
more
at the next
time.
meeting, I hope.
All set?
All right, very good.
Mr. Chairman, may I be excused?
May,
It was a pleasure.
thank you for staying.
Good to see everyone. Thank you.
Okay, new business, master plan goals.
Our master plan goals were, and